Hello and welcome everybody. In this video we are going to see the second part of the PHP 5 to PHP 7 migration guide. In the previous video we have seen together the backward and compatible changes that have been introduced in PHP 7. The link is available in the description below and it will appear in the suggestion area as well. That's for the first video. Now the second video, as we said, we are going to speak about the new features. The first one will be the scalar type declaration. So let's go ahead. Scalar type declaration has been introduced in PHP 7, which will give us the possibility to type hint our arguments if they are of type scalar type. Before, in PHP 5, we can type hint our argument if they are of objects, arrays, interfaces, or callable. Now it's possible to type hint them if they are of type scalar, for example, integer, boolean, or float. We also have the possibility to declare the return type as a scalar type. Now this feature comes with two flavors. The first one being the strict mode, meaning that we declare strict type equals to 1. In this mode, if we pass a variable that does not match the type defined in the type hinting, we are going to have an error, meaning that here, for example, I have sum of ints, which is a function that will be summing all the integers passed to it as argument, and it will be returning an integer. So in the strict mode over here, if we pass string 3 and 4.1 float, we are going to have an error saying that those types does not match the type hint. So if I execute this code, I'm going to have an error, type error argument 3 passed to sum of ints must be of type integer float given. Now the second mode is the coercive mode, which we can say that it's a transitive mode that we can use before moving to strict types equals to 1. In this mode, PHP will try its best to convert variables to match the type hinting, meaning here the 3 as a string will be converted to 3 as integer, the 4.1 as a float will be converted to 4. So we are going to have 2 plus 3, 5, and then plus 4, 9 as a result. Let's try that out and execute our code again, and we have 9 as a result. So that's for scalar type declaration. Now let's move on to the second change, which is a new operator that have been introduced. In PHP 5, if we want to get the user from the global array variable $get, we will use this expression over here. Username equals isSet $get of user. Then if that is set, we are going to get the value itself by writing $get of user. Otherwise we are going to return nobody, for example, as a string. Now this expression over here is replaced in PHP 7 by this expression. Username equals $get of user, and then the null coalescing operator, then nobody, meaning that here we are going to check if this variable is set first. If it is set, we will return it. Otherwise we are going to return this value over here. Now it's interesting here, but it's more interesting if you want to chain the null coalescing operator. Let's see this example over here. Say that we want to get the username by checking on get, then post, then if it is not available on those two, we are going to get nobody. So in PHP 5 it will be writing a complex expression, but in PHP 7 with the null coalescing operator we will write $get of user, then the null coalescing operator, then $post of user, then the null coalescing operator, and finally nobody. So that simplifies a lot the code and make us win some time and write a beautiful code. Now the third change is the spaceship operator. Its shape is kind of a space shape, although it's not vertical, it's horizontal. And the spaceship operator will be comparing basically two expressions, one on the left and one on the right. And then if the value on the left is bigger than the value on the right, we are going to have a positive value basically. And if they are equal, we are going to have 0. And if the value on the left is smaller than the value on the right, we are going to have a negative value. A good way to remember this by using the difference between the items. If the item on the left is bigger, we are going to have a positive value. If they are equal, we are going to have a 0. And if the item on the left is smaller than the item on the right, we are going to have a negative value. This spaceship operator is very useful in a specific case, which is sorting an array of objects or an array of arrays or an array in general, since the second argument of the useSort function takes a callable that should return a positive or negative or a zero value depending on the comparison between two items of the array. So if you want, for example, to sort this things array according to the foo item, we simply have to return a of foo and then the spaceship operator and then b of foo, which is equivalent to saying that if a of foo is bigger than b of foo, then return 1. If a of foo is equal to b of foo, then return 0, else return a positive value. Now the fourth change, it's not an operator, but it is a way that we can define constants. Back in PHP 5.6, we cannot define a constant using the define keyword. So if we want to define a constant, we only have to use the const keyword. Now in PHP 7, this possibility is made available. So that's a small minor change in PHP 7. The fifth change is anonymous classes. Anonymous classes are useful when a simple one of objects need to be created. Let's say, for example, that we have an interface logger that have a public function which is called log that takes string as argument, and we have an application that will be using a logger as attribute. This application will have a getter and a setter for this logger. Now if you want to set a logger to this application and you want to use that logger just one time for the sake of this application, back in PHP 5 we have to create a class that implements this logger and then write the implementation within and then create an instance of that class. Now in PHP 7 we have the possibility to create a new instance of a class that implements this logger. So we have to use this syntax over here, new class implements logger, and then we write just the implementation of the log function, which is not bad at all. Now the sixth change is for the closure call. PHP 7 has introduced a shorthand way of temporarily binding an object scope to a closure and invoking it. Say that we have a getX variable that will be containing a function that will be returning this x. We can bind this function to a class A in PHP 5 in this way, creating a variable, and then we'll bind this function to a new instance of A and provide the scope, and finally we'll call this variable as a function. In PHP 7 all this is simplified by just calling getX and then call new A. This call function to closure is introduced in PHP 7, which will simplify the task for us. The seventh change is for the unserialize function. The unserialize in PHP 5 takes the item to be unserialized. As a second argument, we have the option to whitelist classes to be unserialized. So if we think that a class could be a threat to us and presents a vulnerability or a security threat, we just have to not provide it in the allowed classes here. So I have an example for that. Let's say that we have in a context, in an e-commerce context, we have a product, an address class and basket. The basket will be containing a list of products and one single address. And then we will be creating two products, let's say for example candy and chocolate, when we will be creating a address as well. And finally the basket will be containing those two products and the address. Now we will be serializing this basket in a serialized variable. And finally, when we want to unserialize, we'll be specifying allowed classes to true. This is the default behavior of unserialize in PHP 5. So all classes are unserialized and are trusted. This is also the behavior if we omit the second argument over here. So if we write unserialize and we give it just the serialized variable, we'll be having the same behavior as allowed classes true, meaning that we'll be unserializing all the classes. Now if you want to whitelist the product class, meaning that we don't trust the address, we want only to unserialize the product, we can write this line over here by writing unserialize, serialized, and then allowed classes, and we give it an array that contains products class. This code over here will be unserializing product for us, but for address we'll be having a PHP incomplete class. Let's test that out. We should be seeing over here the first var dump containing all the basket unserialized without whitelisting, without blacklisting items. So all classes are whitelisted, and the second var dump will be showing us the basket with the address blacklisted and the product whitelisted. So let's test this code over here by executing php and 7 filtered unserialize. So let's see the first dump. This is the first dump. We have an object of type basket, and then within we have an array of two products, product 6 and product 7, and also the address, which is an object of address. This is the first dump. Now the second dump contains an object of PHP incomplete class, because there is a PHP incomplete class within. So we have an object of basket, and then we have an object of product. This is the first one, and this is the second one. And for the address we have PHP incomplete class. So if an item is not whitelisted in PHP unserialize, then it will be translated to PHP incomplete class in unserialize function. Now let's move on to the change number 8, which is a simplification of the use namespace. In PHP 5 we write 3 lines to import class A, B, C from the namespace X. In PHP 7 we can group all that by using this syntax over here, use some namespace X and then curly braces and then all the classes within that namespace. So that's a good simplification, and that applies as well for functions and constants. That's the change number 8. Now the change number 9 is the return expression for generators. Back in PHP 5, if we write this code over here, return 3 within a generator, we are going to have an error, PHP fatal error, generators cannot return values. Let's test that out to be sure. So if I execute PHP 9 generator return expression, and you're having an error saying that generators cannot return value using return in generator return expression line 7, which is this line over here. Now in PHP 7 this return is made possible, and we can have a return value for the generator, which is a good news, especially if you want to work in a multi-threading context. The last change, which is a very minor change but it is worth mentioning, is the introduction of the int div function, which will allow us to divide two numbers, number 1 and number 2. This function will be throwing division by 0 error if divisor is 0, and it will be throwing an arithmetic error if the dividend is PHP int mean and the divisor is -1. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and see you in videos to come.